Rich, thanks for joining us today. I'm really happy to have you. As I was thinking about this ahead of time, I realized that I probably have a lot more questions for you than I realized.
Yeah, well, hopefully my going on 80-year-old memory can pull up a few things.
I think it will, but it's amazing how during the course of a long relationship like that, there's so many questions that actually never get asked. Right. So I think I can understand going north, and I understand the attraction of Anderson Valley, but you didn't just end up in Anderson Valley, you ended up at 1,600 feet on top of the mountain of Boonville.
Right.
And that takes some finding. So I want to hear about that. Why did you get up to there?
I probably looked at 20, maybe 25 properties in the valley. So it was Rex McClellan was the realtor who was Milla Hanley's
husband. Yeah.
Unfortunately passed on early. So we just looked at everything, including, he's the real estate guy in one place. And, it's all redwoods. You just have to cut all those redwoods down and you can farm it. I'm going, I'm not cutting any redwoods down. Yes, and it was kind of a laugh, but what are you showing me this for,
Yeah.
And it was a nice piece. Farther, again, you have to remember, but that farm was off the grid then. There was no electricity also at that point, so everything was self-powered
Or not.
or not. So.
But did you have the sense of, I found the greatest piece of property out there, or was this more like we're just going to see what happens, or?
No, I was pretty enthused about it. Not just coming from a high level of knowledge, of course, but I really did feel that with that I knew there's something, the nature of growing. Plus, I knew the nature of growing just from our farms. The coolness was going to slow things down, and then, of course, with grapes, I was less aware. And other plants, too. Not apples, but, the wind slows things down. It shuts those stomata right up. Is one of the other things. I also had some of that involved, too. I didn't, because it was just personal. What I was doing wasn't necessarily providing any agricultural necessity to anybody, so water was an issue. I was going to put a bunch of peaches up there or apples at the top where you don't have the water to feed them. They're radiating, and grapes are pretty hardy. I don't want to say they're easy to grow, because on one level they are, but on another to get what you're looking for at the end, and particularly in Pinots. Maybe a couple of other grapes. To get there, it's pretty difficult. But so I didn't, that is why one of the reasons I landed on grapes. Plus, looking at it, they're relatively easy to grow organically. In terms of some other. If you were in the real farming business, some other things to grow, you can.
I went up there and looked around first in.
Right, you went into Jeff right at
Well, I first went up in '86, and I remember tasting a wine that Phyllis Callagher made at Pepperwood Springs.
Oh, right, Pepperwood, yeah, right.
Yeah, so that was up Holmes Ranch Road, right below the vineyard that's currently Roman Vineyard. So I had tasted this wine, and I had one of those aha moments, where I was like, the fruit components of this wine. There were a lot of things in the wine that really spoke to me, and that's what I experienced in Anderson Valley.
She was good. I had some dealings with her. Yeah, Pepperwood. I forgot Pepperwood.
Yeah. I don't know how
I did drink their wines and liked them. It was after I'd already bought
the property. Yeah, exactly.
Felt it and all that. But, yeah.
But the point was, it was an aha wine, and then I said, okay, well, if we ever do Pinot Noir, if I ever strike out on my own, I definitely want to look into Anderson Valley.
Right.
And so then in '92, whatever it was, 6 years later, when we started snooping around, right, I was looking for contacts in Anderson Valley, and of course, people knew the two Steves, Steve Williams and Steve Slicki. And so I contacted Steve Williams and said, hey, can you show me around? Can you suggest stuff, whatever? And so Steve met me, and we spent, a day or two together, and we went up to your place. At that point, Jeff had already started working for you, but Steve was kind enough to bring me up. And I so remember, Rich, the wineries owned a fair amount of Anderson Valley, right? So you weren't going to buy grapes from Hush, you weren't going to buy grapes from Navarro. There was a lot less Pinot back then, as you already pointed out. You weren't going to buy grapes from Edmead. So there's a whole lot of stuff in the valley that just wasn't available. Then there was a lot of stuff that was going purely for sparkling, and that wasn't going to change. So if you throw in the three things that you've indirectly mentioned, clonal quality, interesting site, and an overall interest in producing something unusual, I felt like you could see everything in Anderson Valley basically in 2 days. And when I remember two things specifically about driving up to see you. The first thing was, and I've had this experience many times in California, it won't come as a secret to anybody who knows Littorai that we tend to love mountain vineyards, that most of our sources are mountain vineyards. And you have this experience in California, if you know it well, whether it's driving up to Mount Eden or Ridge, or driving up to David Bruce, or driving up to the top of Howell Mountain, or the top of Mount Eviter. The feeling of driving up to Deer Meadows and you're going, well, aren't we there yet? Aren't we there yet? How much further how much further up this bloody hill are we going to go before we get there? And so I remember that feeling, and also arriving at the top, right? And as often happens in California mountaintop vineyards, which the name implies, you just have this lovely opening out. When you get to the top of the hill. And I remember really distinctly the three clones and the discussion with you, and the fact that, there was a bear there, to use the famous phrase about Oakland, that you cared about quality. Yeah, you had a passion. And I mean, from your perspective, you might have said, well, I don't know who this punk kid is, but
I was looking for all the help I could get.
But
no, you clearly had a vision and knew what you were doing, and I saw that right away. I mean, it's not just interested in interesting quality and a long-term vision. Long-term, what you had was not the.
But it's one thing to say that when you're in year one. Anybody can say that, right?
Which of course gets into year two.
Yeah, well, you should. Okay, so we have to tell the year two story. It's a great story. So.
Yeah, 93 is the first year with 10
right. 93 is the
amazing grapes there. That's great. 94 was a crazy year. The grapes all split. Nobody still knows why. Well, and it's suddenly you're having these 23, 24, 30 bricks.
Right, so it's a splitting of the berry skins. So you had shot berries, tiny berries. They all started splitting and drying.
It was crazy. And then Ted said, I can't use these. This is the second year.
Yeah, that was a delicate moment. I was like, Rich, this is a real problem.
Yeah.
And we're really lucky that you had the patience.
Well, no, it was real. I mean, what we're gonna. I had the same vision. No, you can't make a great, wine out of those. You can't. Or a good wine. You might put them in something, which the person who bought them did. They had some wine grapes that weren't quite ripe, so I just threw these. It might have been Graziano, I don't remember. Yeah, they just threw them in
a larger vat.
In a big vat, and so they had a lot of sugar, and they had their structure hadn't gone. It's just they'd split and dried out in the world.
The other thing that I was going to say that strikes me when I look back on that period of time when we were working together, of course, is that we were growing our business, so I was running around like a madman, just trying to do everything you need to do, and so basically we concentrated on the blocks that were the source of 1 acre, and then every now and then, if you had some leftover fruit, or if we decided to make some Vin Gris or whatever, we'd get some grapes. But fast forwarding to later, when you and I started talking about us buying it, I obviously, I was aware that I really didn't know the rest of the property very well. Right. I really, I'd been like this, head down the whole time. And so I felt really comfortable with all of the blocks that were right there at the, as you say, at the gate, the entrance to the house, where the 1 acre parcel is. And the rest of it was a discovery, really, for me. Yeah. Right?
Well, the variation of it was pretty amazing.
Huge
piece of land, it's just, you had to treat it so individually, and each little piece, and so the hills way up took a whole different what needs for water, and it was irrigation, and it was slower if you didn't need to water that separately.
Yeah, the blocks were 1/2 and 1 acre in size generally, right? And so you had to juggle the water for all of them. You had to juggle the fact that you weren't living there full time.
Right. I was up there a lot for a while, though, and then I got divorced from Jude. I was up there quite a bit at that point, primarily actually for a long time, which helped. And then I backed off from the stores and ultimately sold them probably 15 years ago now.
Yeah, right.
Somewhere in that.
The bookstores were sold, yeah. And I remember, I'll never forget, so in person, obviously Rich and I can talk like normal human beings, but a lot of times the email communication was pretty short or quick, or the messages were pretty quick, right? And so probably back in, I don't know, I'm going to make this up, 09 or something, I'd mentioned to you years ago, if you ever want to sell, let me know, and whatnot. And all that, and that was great. And then it was before 09, it was well before that. And then the Great Recession came along, and I just shut up.
Yeah.
Right? All of a sudden, we built this winery, and
the recession and the smoke.
And that's right, 2008. It was like all of a sudden I just went away and said, I don't exist for a while. And then I don't know what got a hold of me, but I was traveling. I was in Asia, and I was sitting in a hotel room in Hong Kong. And I just said, I'm going to send an email to Rich and just mention it again, about if you ever want to sell. And so I shot off to you a really quick email and said, hey, just want to remind you, or bring it back up again if you ever want to sell. And I'll never forget the classic response I got from you, which was pretty much like 2 lines in an email. It might have been 3 sentences. And it was, yes, but if we're going to do it, we need to do it quickly. With no explanation.
Yeah.
I looked at this email and I'm like, classic. And so I got on the phone, and we had a chat. And you explained to me the quickly, which was a very Rich Savoy-like, thoughtful, ethical, moral reason, because you had talked to some people about renting or leasing long-term the house and the
right.
And you didn't want to leave them hanging.
Right, yeah, and on that, there was, I was getting ready to, stop growing and stop farming at that point, a few years ago. I was starting to wind down on it. I was on the edge of not selling, and then I go, do something else or whatever. I'd had those people coming in, and it wasn't something I really wanted to do. So, and I was in the middle of thinking, well, you either deal with them or let's market it, go out there and really push it.
Yeah.
And then
go ahead and find a
contacted me, and then I went, and then we had that disaster up in the hill.
Yeah.
God.
And I remember really well, we did the negotiation and discussion of price and all that stuff, and for me, it was really, as I started to allude to a moment ago, Rich, it was really a rediscovery of the rest of the property. Really, and so we had so much fun making all the different blocks separately here for the first time. Oh, it was just so much fun. And as you said, the blocks that face to the northwest, 10, 11, 12, was really a discovery for me, what we bottle as the return now. Because, that was the far end of the property. So was the place I never went. It's like out beyond.
It's totally different.
Yeah, totally different world, different exposure, different acidity, everything. And
I mean, there's 777, 667 are different up there than they are down
exactly.
in front of the house.
Yeah, the expression of the fruit is completely different, even if it's the same clone. And then Block 8, which is the one sort of between them, which faces more east, has its own character. And all those things were really a great learning process for me. I mean, I knew it was the right thing to purchase, but I think it was only after that I really understood how really complex that little project was.
I was dividing, like that acre number 1 in there. I had that divided up in 3 different growing blocks and irrigation things.
For 1 acre. Yeah.
Right, because what you got up there is totally different than down here, which was a heavy grower and good for some things.
Yeah.
Yeah, one of those things with that farm, with Savoy, is one thing, even when I was still working at the bookstore, I was really, really hands-on. I was there. I mean, I was doing the sugars and the acids and the stuff. It wasn't somebody else coming in.
Oh yeah, at harvest time for sure.
Winemakers are doing their own, but I was out there, and doing that classic. I remember that hot year. It wasn't the fires, but normally I would sort of tell the winemakers that I'm doing what they want, and to some degree go about doing what I was going to do. Yeah, which I would do with that, and I feel like he knew more than I did, which was true. But there was that really hot year. And the grapes were like 22.
Probably 03 maybe?
Something might have been, it was a while back. I'm down there because I'm down there all the time. And I've certainly seen the grapes go from 22, 23 to 24. This is in a day or two. Like this, and I'm down there with a circular running water 24 hours, putting something on each block to try and reduce and then circulating the blocks. And I call Dad, to see if it's okay. It didn't bother anybody else. Of course it was, but that would have been, the man might have hands-on. If I wasn't around, somebody...
It wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have happened.
It wouldn't have
Jeff
happened.
wouldn't have really thought about it. And that probably, to my mind, saved you got the crop right back down to 22, right where it was within a couple of days of circulating. I put a lot of water on it. I don't remember how much, but for grapes that are getting close to ripening, 10, 12, maybe more gallons at least. Through us, maybe 2-3 cycles, depending on where it was, some more than others. And how the grapes were responding per block and all that. It was an unusual year.
The other thing we have to mention is that you did replant, right? Due to phylloxera, when the AXR went down.
On Deer Meadows.
Yes,
Deer
Meadows.
Yeah, phylloxera came.
And
So I couldn't identify that particular phylloxera as one of the new phylloxeras. Wasn't it's theoretically the asexual thing that's not supposed to genetically change.
right. But
The science, right? No, they were changing. You'd see the swoop come across from the pond, right up into our Ted's area on that, and rather than mess around, I just pulled it.
yeah, well, it declined pretty quickly, right?
Some areas were fine.
Some
actually.
areas were
yeah,
fine.
Yeah, I was really into that field, those 2 fields up in the driveway, It started down there where the wet is, which I guess phylloxera kind of likes to some degree. And then went right up into yours following the tractors. Of course, the tractors didn't go up and come into the driveway, they would go right on through. So it had to do with that. And rather than futz around and just plant a block here and a block, rip the whole thing and went back to a little different, slightly different orientation, but and did the 7 by 4 or 3.5 again on that vertical, which makes for a much better and different. What the hell do we use for rootstock? We got it from
10114.
Martinez, 10114, right? From Martinez.
And I'll never forget the discussion with you after the first year of replanting, right? Because we changed the row orientation. The clones were not exactly the same.
Right.
Rootstock was not the same, and I'll never forget. I think you were more nervous than I was.
Yeah.
I think you were. I don't know. I was naive or just
We
confident.
were doing field grafting too, and some of the stuff, and that got into issues too. And
Sure. I mean, with grafts not taking well.
yeah.
Yeah.
I got into a mess right in part of that, which I shouldn't have done. I should have waited and found what I wanted. Grey Goose supplied some, and rather than up in that weather, grafting, it's just not a good.
Not an easy thing.
Not easy to get done and good. And the grafters were well experienced. I can't remember his name. I mean, he was good, but even that.
Yeah. But I'll never forget once we finally had wine in tank, right, or juice in tank, and we tasted the juice, and you could absolutely tell that it was the same stuff, the same essence as the stuff was, the XR was before phylloxera.
Right.
And I'll never forget. I called you up right away and
Right,
it was still in juice. I said, not a problem.
Yeah.
Not an issue.
Cited.
I do want to ask you about Savoy, the vineyard on 128, because that was not that many years later at all, really, right? I mean, 84, when you planted in 85 at Deer Meadows?
85.
Right, you planted in 85, and then you bought the ranch down on 128 in Philo in what, 90 or 89 or 5 years?
It was 80, at the end of 89. But prior to that, I'd actually bought 2 pieces out at the Holmes Ranch.
Oh, didn't know this part.
Right where Mella had originally had her little winery. There were 2 pieces. Claudia Springs bought 1. Anyway, I bought 2 20s. I was going to develop there, I think, because I was looking for cold weather and go strictly on Pinot go in, which after thinking about it, I realized, that was a bit venturesome for my economic situation. At that point, if I was going to go that big, I needed to be able to make money out of it somehow. I couldn't just grow 40 acres of fancy and be lucky to get 2 tons if I was, lucky with, it's a winery, you could make that. So I actually ended up selling those. I actually traded them for the Savoy Vineyard from, what's his name, horse guy. Did a 1031
Exchange
on that, which was a good thing. I just started looking and going, it's probably, still out there far enough to be relatively cool, not too hot like the valley floor of Boonville would be terrible, although I did look at a ranch down there also. And so it'll work, and you could get that wind coming in, which will somewhat ameliorate the heat a bit, and so on and so forth. And you could make a good wine. Maybe I don't know if you're going to make a great wine, but certainly a good marketable wine in the upper price point. Maybe not that one, but in the price point. And I think that worked. It's I don't think it's the same level as Deer Meadows, but personally.
Did you feel like
And we opened a nice Savoy the other night at Thanksgiving too. My granddaughter was into the stuff, took one taste of the slightly thin stuff, and said, "Can I go and get something?" So we did open it.
did you feel at all, because that was a big commitment, that was what, 25 total acres or something, or more?
No, the original was 44, and I think it was like 340,000 or something, which was a lot of money then for that.
And you planted like right away, what, 20 something?
No, I planted 10.
You planted 10 first, okay.
Yeah, we went in and I did enough money to get it going. The problem was, I went half Pinot and half Chard at the bottom of that first planting over toward the west. And then was trying to get a loan from Farm Credit at the time, whatever its name was, and different names, gone through some names. And I think I put a mortgage somewhat on. I actually oddly made money in that when I traded those two things out. I bought them at around 90,000, sold them each at over 130 within a year. You know, you just luck heaven though they wanted it. And I took that and some money, mortgaging part of the house. I bought that land and used it to start building the pond. I was building the biggest pond for a reason as I could. My only regret is I didn't do more pond, actually, ultimately. Which I had planned on that being a backup, but the pond time they hadn't shut down your water rights, which they essentially did. So I still put in the biggest one because I felt that storing winter water and using that as much as possible and not using summer water was the right thing to do.
Sure.
And as it is still in reality. On that, I got kind of caught by the short hairs because it took 9 months to get that loan through. And I was kind of running out of money at pin the needles because I was starting to develop the pond, the next 20 acres. Putting it in something like 32 acres or something.
That's what I was trying to say, is all of a sudden, this isn't a second job.
No,
You've gone from Deer Meadows at 8.5, 9 acres to, almost tripled before you knew it.
Oh yeah, well, 4 times.
You were
10, 30, I had 40 acres there, and then I waited a couple more, 3 years, I think it was 91, 92. It might have gone into 94 and 95, developed a few at a time after that. Yeah, suddenly it was a big deal.
Yeah, suddenly it's a big deal. And I remember, so what I heard you say was that what you liked about that site was it was not the warmer end of the valley. It wasn't the coolest.
Right.
So in terms of yields, you felt like you'd probably be okay.
Yeah, I think you could get a consistent yield too.
Yeah.
Well, was the issue. But then I understood that I could control my crop load after that adventure with the 10 tons. And that, and if I did put it out, of course, a little tighter spacing and less vigorous rootstock, and some clonal selections. I just put it on Chardonnay and still, couldn't go all Pinot.
Yeah. Well, and that's like, people may miss, in a sense, what you were saying, but basically that experience of Deer Meadows where you'd had a big crop and you dropped it and were able to achieve what you wanted, gave you the confidence down at Savoy to say, okay, maybe this is going to crop higher, but I know if I adjust it, I'll get something that works for me and the client.
Right, and I tried to do the economics then of whatever the price point per acre and stuff that would work out, thinking that at that area, at 3 tons, you wouldn't be pushing the grape, losing its structures, losing its balance and that, and then you could get it off early enough where it would still have some nice balanced wine. By then I knew enough to be looking at that. Yeah. There were people who wanted to go 4 tons or more, and other. I just, you need a different vineyard, because I wanted to see a quality from everybody. You know, they got rid of people. You never know. Able
Right.
to do that.
And the two things that strike me about that. One is that the consistency at Savoy was greater, right? Because you're valley floor, you're a little more protected. As you said, you get a better crop level in general. You're not going to have the really shy years. And then the other thing that I loved about it, the reason I signed up right away, was I really liked that intersection between the alluvial soils and the sandstone.
Right.
I thought that was just really interesting.
Yeah, that area.
There's not a lot of places in Anderson Valley where you really have those both in the same vineyard.
Yeah.
You know, see, often you're either in the sandstone or you're in the alluvials, and a lot of the alluvials, as you know, get pretty vigorous.
Right.
But when people ask me about, you know, if you were a grape grower and what vineyards would you own if you could own anything, I always say to them that Savoy is one of them because it's one of those magical places where you can get really good yield and consistent quality.
Yeah.
And I remember the Chardonnay that used to get for sparkling water. The truckloads of fruit that would depart from that little tiny vineyard. Rich, I think we should say thank you so much for doing this.
My pleasure.
It's really fun.
A great
Really?
time doing business with you over the years. It was the best. I learned so much, and dealing with you was really good. And it was generally with the winemakers what I liked about, just to say, the wine business in dealing with it. It just was a great experience dealing with people who were really, you know, the upper end of the wine business. Were really interested in wanting to do what they wanted to do, and that really made a difference and a pleasure to do that, to be in that business. It was, yeah.